Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining and being here with us today. My name is Charlotte de Brabant, and I'm a member of the French Heritage Society's Young Patrons Circle. And I'm so pleased to introduce our third installment of this Innovation in Action virtual event series. We've been hearing from dynamic chateau owners in France who are creating multimedia content through YouTube, Instagram, and crowdfunding platforms to raise awareness and support for their restoration work. Their stories have provided inspiration and much needed escapism to thousands of worldwide viewers over the past year. Today, we will be hearing from Philipp and Anna Mayrhofer, who purchased the Château Gonneville-sur-Honfleur just 2 years ago. And having a lovingly nickname called the Chateau le Fleur, they are preserving its period features and ushering in its new chapter as a family home and guest house business. And the couple documents all of the ups and downs of this process with warmth and humor on their fast-growing YouTube channel. How to renovate a chateau without killing your partner. Now I'll hand over to Jennifer Herrlein, our Executive Director of the French Heritage Society.
Thanks so much, Charlotte. On behalf of all of us at French Heritage Society, I say a special bonjour to our members who have joined us today and a warm bienvenue to those of you who are new to our programming. For those who might not be familiar, French Heritage Society's mission over the past 39 years is awarding preservation grants to culturally and historically significant French architecture, both in the United States and in France. An equally important part of our mission is ensuring that the skills required to work on these preservation projects are transferred to the next generation. And through our advanced internship program, each year we select and send around 35 students from prestigious universities in France and the United States across the Atlantic for internships. Lastly, I would like to thank the FHS team for their work on this program. Natalie May thoughtfully curated the series, and Ben Wells is making sure that we have a perfectly smooth experience together. And just a bit of housekeeping before we begin. Your videos are currently disabled, but you are welcome to submit questions throughout using the Q&A button along the bottom of your screen, and I'll share them with Anna and Philipp following our conversation. At the end of the program, we'll give all of you the opportunity to turn your videos on and unmute yourselves so that you can ask questions directly if you wish to do so. And of course, I thank Anna and Philipp for being here with us today. Before we start speaking, however, I think the perfect way to set the tone for our conversation is to transport all of you to Chateau le Fleur through this video.
My name is Anna. I'm an English former fashion and textile designer. I moved to Paris aged 23 to work for the French couture house Baumann and stayed for the croissants, the wine, and of course for Philipp, a filmmaker who was introduced to me as an Italian, but later turned out to be part of an obscure German-speaking minority from the South Tyrolean Alps. After 10 amazing years, getting married, buying and renovating 2 homes, and having 2 babies, we decided city life was no longer for us. Philipp had been dreaming of buying a chateau since the day we met and finally convinced me to start looking. After seeing only one other place, we came to visit Château Gonneville-sur-Honfleur, located in a rural village just outside the charming harbour city of Honfleur in Normandy. Despite being in quite poor condition and needing a complete renovation, we immediately fell in love. It wasn't an easy process. There were 8 extremely stressful months negotiating with the owners and desperately searching for a bank willing to give us a loan. Only a couple of days before it would have been sold to somebody else, we finally got a green light from a bank. In May 2019, we got the keys to the chateau, our new home. With a tight budget, we had no choice but to do most of the renovations by ourselves. We're learning new skills as we go, building muscles we never knew we had, and getting creative to make the chateau as personal as possible whilst preserving its historic features. Since, it's been 20 months of full-on renovations and starting our new guest house business, which, at least, that was the plan, would help us finance the further stages of renovations. We opened our doors to guests in August 2020, only to shut them 1 month later as the world closed its borders and France went into lockdown during the global pandemic. We'll continue our mission of rescuing and renovating our chateau for as long as it takes. It's all part of this crazy family adventure, and we wouldn't change it for anything.
Wow. Hearing that you started opening the chateau in August of 2020, I think most certainly shows the impact that the pandemic has had on you. But how did you end up there? What took you to Le Fleur, and why did you choose that location?
Well, firstly, thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction and for inviting us on here. It was a bit of a crazy story, really, because when I first met Philip, he was always a bit of a dreamer, and I think ever since I've known him, he's always sort of obsessed about looking for chateau online and dreaming about perhaps buying a chateau one day, and I always thought he was absolutely crazy. Until I was on maternity leave, my second maternity leave, and I was looking for a different change of lifestyle, and we've been talking about what I could be doing, maybe to, change my career. And I think we were on holiday, and Philip had an epiphany that we should sell our house in the suburbs of Paris. I should leave my job, and we should move to the countryside, buy a chateau, and open a chambre d'hôte guest house business. And I think he just got me at a really weak point, but he had finally convinced me, and I thought it was an amazing idea. And it was very quick. We decided as soon as we got back from our holiday, I think the first weekend after we returned, we started looking for chateau. And this was only the second chateau that we ever visited. And for me, it just was the perfect location, the perfect size. It felt so, it had a really good feeling. I can't really explain it, but it just had such a good feeling. And I just could envision myself here. And the location on the coast, just close to Honfleur, it was a perfect location for our guest house. So it ticked so many boxes, and we also knew that we wanted to be somewhere that was within a few hours of Paris to keep our connections with our friends. And also for me, I was hoping to go closer to the UK where my family are. So it was just the perfect chateau, and we just fell in love when we saw it. So it was only the second chateau we ever saw.
Which is incredible. I mean, it must have been it really got you. It was love at first sight, so to speak.
Yes, definitely.
Well, we didn't realize how bad condition it was when we came here.
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
I think we were looking through our rose-tinted glasses at the beginning.
And what was the condition when you bought it, and what did you think the restoration plan would look like?
Well, there was still people living here. The previous owners, they lived here. They didn't use all the rooms. They used about 4 or 5 rooms, and that was also the rooms that were heated with different heating systems. And it was fully furnished. There was paintings on the walls, carpets. So it looked nice and cozy. It wasn't our style, and we knew that we would need to make some changes. But actually, when you buy a house in France, just before you sign the final contract, the house is empty, and you go and look at it if still everything is in order. And that was I went there on my own because Anna was still working. And then after I called her, Anna, it looks a bit different, empty. You might be shocked when you see it. And she saw it only after we got the keys, and then we came here. And it looked different. And obviously we knew that it would be a full renovation and restoration. But yeah, we just realized that basically everything, we had to redo everything from scratch.
I think also we tried to be, careful and look at, things like the roof, the state of the roof, the things that we thought would be a huge expense. And we were assured that that was in quite good state. So we were feeling quite confident. about our plan and our budget. But we were really surprised when we learned that the facade, we thought it was maybe just a bit of a clean and some repairs. And once we had purchased the chateau and we started to look for quotes from masons, we uncovered the truth, which was that it was a huge undertaking, and that was a big shock to us, wasn't it?
Well, we renovated before different apartments, and we had a certain experience, and we weren't naive. We knew what things would cost, but there's one thing we never did, and that was obviously redoing a facade of a chateau. So that was a really bad estimate of mine, and it turned out being about 3 times as expensive as we expected. So yeah, that was the major shock. But the roof was in okay condition. We know it will still last for a couple of years by doing repairs on a regular basis, at least 5-6 years, according to the roofer. And for the rest, we knew how it was, and we knew that we need to do the jobs, and we were able to calculate it. So yeah.
And then how did you prioritize the various projects that you were going to work on? Obviously the facade is critical. Yeah. But how did you prioritize the work that you'd be doing?
Well, we started with the main facility. Like it was plumbing, of course, getting water in, because the previous owner, there was 1 bathroom, and obviously that wasn't nor enough for us as a family, nor enough, of course, even less so for guest house. So we had to make everything new. We had to have a bigger water pipe coming in. There was a sewage tank outside, a septic tank, sorry. But it was really old, and it wasn't at all in the norms. So we had to change that. We moved that, and we connected ourselves to the public sewage system, which is great because no more tanks to empty. So we were lucky it wasn't too far away, but still huge trench going to the garden. And in a chateau, in an 18th century chateau, there was obviously never any plumbing planned. So there were literally just beautiful rooms. So we needed to find a way to get in the first floor and then the second floor. And yeah, we ended up having to dig a huge trench in the entrance to get all the pipes in and all the heating and the plumbing. And so that was the first step. And
we started also the renovation of our private living quarters, which are in the second floor. So we live in what was formerly like the servants' quarters. And we decided that was a priority for us with our young children. We wanted to have somewhere nice to live, and it's a fairly small part of the chateau, so it wasn't a crazy task, but it did end up taking us a lot longer than we estimated. So we lived for the first 6 months in the first floor guest rooms, and we were basically camping, weren't we, and living with our stuff in cardboard boxes. And we had this 1 bathroom that wasn't heated. It was the middle of winter. We didn't have heating, and I can remember the girls, when we had to give them a bath, they were like crying because getting out of the bath, it was like absolutely freezing. So we prioritized doing our apartment because we were living on site during the renovation, and yeah, so that was our first step, was doing our second floor apartment, and then we were able to move up there, and that freed up all of the first floor guest rooms, and we were able to start. So we decided to do 3 guest rooms because we had done a business plan, and we had a mortgage with the bank, so we had decided that was what we needed to be able to sustain our business and pay back our mortgage. So we had that in mind, and we knew that we needed the central staircase finished, and we needed 1 breakfast salon finished for the guests.
I mean, so the priorities were based on your need to continue working on the property, in fact.
Yeah.
Interesting. And one of the questions I always like to ask, to people who purchase these chateaus, the chateaus all have a story and a history, hundreds of years long. What is the history of yours?
Well, on the location of the chateau, there used to be a Norman fortress, and then this fortress was burned down by the French because the owner was swapped over to the British side during the English side during the 100-year wars, and so they weren't really happy with that and burned the fortress down and the chateau down, and he got compensated, and a new chateau was built. And then there's a long period where we don't know what happened. But in the previous owner, they bought this chateau during the First World War, and they bought it because they wanted to escape the bombings of Paris. And they bought it, and it was in really bad conditions. There was a previous renovation in the beginning of the 19th century, and we know exactly the date. It was 1827, where the 18th century core of this chateau has been modernized to the standard of the 19th century and to the taste of the 19th century. But in between the 100 Years' War and the 18th century, we don't know who built the main part of the chateau, because the chateau has an 18th century, the main building, the middle building is 18th century, and there's a 19th century extension on one side. And we don't know who made these 18th century chateaux, nor we don't know who it was. We don't know why he made it. It's obviously some sort of hunting lodge. It's a building to entertain, because all the rooms are grand. It's not a family home, because the bedrooms are way too grand. There was no big kitchen. So it was probably like a weekend retreat for a really wealthy person who came here for parties. And the reason we don't know is because the previous owner, they were probably not very interested in the history, and we have a huge box we inherited with the chateau with historic documents, originals, and some of them date back to the 15th century, so they're very, very precious. And I'm sure we could learn a lot about the history of this building once we have the time to decipher them, to have them translated and archived correctly. And we know that there are archives in France where we were told there would be some history about this chateau, and also in the UK to understand what happened before. So there's a lot of work to do for us. We really look forward to have the time to make this investigation. And unfortunately, we didn't have it yet, but we can't wait to know what happened to the chateau during the French Revolution. And then it has an interesting history in the 20th century, because they purchased it during the First World War, but during the Second World War, like many other big buildings, it was occupied by the Germans twice. At the beginning of the war, the Nazis installed troops here. And then during the D-Day, they turned it into a hospital, and the family was still living here, the previous owner's grandparents. So they had half of the chateau, and the other half was for the Germans. And they had over 200 injured soldiers here. So these salons where we are right now, this was a hospital. So there were 200 beds with injured soldiers, and they lived here during several years up to the end of the war. And unfortunately, there was quite a lot of damage as well.
And you didn't mention as well that the previous family, they bought the property to create a cider and Calvados business. So the chateau was run for well, how many years? I think they stopped production in the 70s. So during, from three generations of family, they were producing cider and Calvados. And it's really nice because we recently were sent a bottle of the Calvados, which is obviously very hard to get your hands on. And it was almost empty, but it was a lady who had spent a holiday just in one of the cottages in front of the chateau about 20 years ago. And it held a really lovely memory, a family memory of a family holiday. And so she kept the bottle, and it dated back from 1974, and it has a tiny, tiny amount of Calvados in it. And she sent it to us to keep here. So we're really excited that we have that, because it's part of also more recent history, but still a very important part of the history of our chateau.
Such a fascinating history, and I am so intrigued by the boxes of archives. I just can't even imagine what will be discovered there. That's an exciting process, I think.
Yes, we can't wait.
Yeah.
So you're giving, through your work, you're giving the chateau a future, but you're also restoring its past through this archival work that will take place. It's an extraordinary undertaking.
Yeah.
And you've done such a go ahead.
We hope we can keep them.
Well, maybe
they've been passed down through obviously generations of owners so far. So,
right.
Yeah.
And you've done such a wonderful job of documenting the work that you've been doing. How did you start doing that, and what made you realize that there would be an audience for that?
It came about quite naturally because I love Instagram and I am a creative person. So I knew that from day one, I wanted to document through our Instagram account. So I set that up as, you know, with no expectations. It was more of for ourselves, for our family and friends, to sort of show them what we were doing. And we also happened to, the exact same day that we got the keys and we started the Instagram, we also were filmed for Escape to the Chateau DIY, which is a UK TV series, which follows other Brits. I think there's a few of them who are also in the series who are featured and who are buying chateau, renovating them. So we began filming with them on the day that we got the keys. So that sort of came about kind of organically and grew organically. And for me, it was just a really fun project to document, you know, the renovation. And so that's kind of grown steadily. But yeah, I let Philip explain about the YouTube, how that came about.
Yeah, at the beginning of our renovation work, we briefly thought about filming, because I'm a filmmaker, so it wouldn't have been like an obvious thing to do. But we thought maybe who's going to be interested to watch movies about, like videos about somebody restoring a chateau. So we gave up on this idea, and only later, with COVID setting in and with us having more time, because we didn't have guests anymore, and nor could we continue renovation because or not as planned, because we didn't have the financial possibility, because we didn't have guests before. Because the initial plan was to renovate 3 rooms, rent them out, and then in the winter renovate the remaining 2 or 3 rooms. So we couldn't do that second phase because we didn't have enough guests. So we had time, but no money, and we said we need to do something. We want to do something. We want to document. Then we had to do a lot of things ourselves, and we said, well, then why don't we film each other whilst we're doing this, and let's see, maybe, who knows, that could be a good advertising for when the lockdown is over. But we never envisioned it as an income, as a potential stream of income for the renovation, for the chateau. Right. Only when we knew that there was other chateau owners who did it, and other chateau owners that you're meeting, presenting, Stephanie, yeah. And but again, we thought, you know, you don't know if somebody would be interested, and we did it, and it was kind of successful. And then we slowly realized that making these videos could become a second income and a second way of financing the restoration of the chateau and the grounds and the outbuildings. And that was a huge change in our life and in the way we see this project and this adventure.
And I think especially, we'll have a slideshow that we're going to pull up here. Ben, you can go ahead and start that. But I think especially over the past year, you've allowed people to escape their oh, yeah. So it'd be great if you could walk us through some of these photos.
Yeah, it's the back garden of the chateau. And when we arrived, it was completely overgrown, and yeah, and the back facade. And that one of the first jobs was to clear out some of the trees, because they were dangerously close to the chateau. And so it wasn't only the chateau; it was also, we had to do something urgent work on the garden. I see scared when I see this image. I can't imagine. I don't remember.
Yeah.
What did we think?
What were we thinking?
The next slide, Ben.
So I think that might have been the first day that we got the keys, and yeah, now it's crazy looking at it and seeing yeah, the state it was in. We've also done a lot of landscaping of the driveway, and we did have to remove the wisteria, which was growing around the chateau, and obviously the shutters for the restoration of the facade. So those are things that we have planned to do. We need to restore the shutters and put them back, and we are planning to add some topiary hedges at the front of our chateau, so it will sit nicely in its landscape again.
But yeah, if you look at the driveway, in the summer it was fine, but in the winter it turned into mud. Yeah. So that was for the first. The chateau was always full of mud, because walking through it was a nightmare. And potholes. And potholes, and made such a difference once we had the driveway restored. And again, obviously, that was another thing, we underestimated the cost of a driveway, because we didn't know that we needed to do that immediately, but we realized you can't live there if every time you go into the chateau, you know, bring all the mud in. So that was another big example I didn't expect it.
It's still incredible to me that you had someone there filming, an external person there filming as of your first day. That's incredibly brave.
Yeah.
It was a bit strange because they literally wanted to have the real moment when we had the keys and we opened the door.
But it was also our first time ever being filmed, so
yeah,
exactly.
100% at ease with it, and I think my parents were there as well, and they hadn't really envisaged being filmed, but they ended up getting roped in too. So, and it's really funny when we watched it back because my dad's reaction. Well, both my parents were in shock, I think, at the state of the chateau. They'd just seen pictures, and I think they saw the state, and they were just like, "What have you done?" So this is the fourth facade that we haven't yet restored. We've restored 3 of the facades, and it's the east facade, the 18th century side. So this is still a facade that we have left remaining to restore. Hopefully within the next 2 years, I hope.
Yeah, no, this winter probably.
Maybe this winter, yeah.
And how long will it take to restore that facade?
Well, they said when we bought the chateau, this was the facade in the best condition. That's why we decided, when we realized we couldn't afford to restore all the facades, we chose this one. Also, it's the most hidden one. So we kept this one, but the mason said this is the most complicated one because, as you can see, there's so many layers of bricks and mortar, and it's quite complicated, and it's beautiful, but they don't know what lies behind when they take off the old mortar and all the layers of cement and other things that shouldn't be there, but the previous owner put there during the last 80 years, then they don't know what to expect. Will they have to replace a massive amount of bricks, or will it be healthy? So there might be a couple of surprises when they restore it. So it took them, for the other 3 facades, it took them about 5 months, 4 or 5 builders for 5 months. And this one, I hope that they would be able to do that. Maybe if they have maybe a month with 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is one of now it's the green guest room, and this is one of our grandest rooms for our guests.
And it has the paneling is 18th century. It's like a Rococo paneling, and yeah, not the fireplace, unfortunately, is not original because, as you can tell, it's something from the beginning of the 20th century. It's probably one of the fireplaces that has been destroyed during the German occupation.
This is one of the salons, which is now our breakfast salon. And yes, there was a lot of repairs to the woodwork and paneling in this room. Again, 18th century paneling. So we had an amazing carpenter who helped us because there was some traces of, how is it called?
Dry rot. That was in this room.
Yeah, so there was some repairs to do to the woodwork.
And the chimney again, it was a beautiful room, but the chimney really ugly and broken. So we found a second-hand chimney online, and we had to rebuild the whole chimney. It was quite an adventure to get this chimney as it is now. The problem is these rooms are so tall. It's just a room, and you think, you know, you have just to renovate one room, and when you start, you realize how high the ceilings are and how much surface you have to restore that.
And this is the entrance hallway and staircase. And the previous owners, the front doors, they actually never used them because it was so drafty. So as you can see here, they just put up the kind of makeshift curtain. And it had actually been decorated in this style with the red fabric for a film that was shot in the chateau in the late 90s with Gérard Depardieu. It was called Le Pont entre deux rives, and we were told that this was set design, basically, that they put in place. It was a very dark entrance hall, and yeah. And a lot of blue paint on the rail, the handrail. And then this is our 2 longhouses.
So on the left side, this was farmhouses, and they were always part of the chateau, and they were certainly there to sustain the chateau as a property. And on the left side, it's a beautiful longhouse with thatched roof, which dates back at least to the 16th century, but it could be older. We had an architect here, and he thinks it's 16, but he also so we will find out. And behind this gigantic tree, which is a Christmas tree, which the previous owners planted them and grew, it's another longhouse, a bit not that old, but much bigger. So these are two buildings that we absolutely want to rescue, especially the one on the left side with the thatched roof. The roof is not in good condition. There's a lot of rain coming in. There's already beams rotting away. So we don't have that much time, because if in these houses, if the beams start rotting, the walls will collapse eventually, and that would be a tragedy. And yeah, and they're not listed, but they're kind of listed. They have from the region, they have like a sort of a label. They encourage the owners to restore them, and they make all the paperwork much easier for you to restore them, because they really want you to save them, so that they have a star. But yeah, so we could easily restore them, and we hope to do that as soon as possible. And when we purchased the chateau, we didn't want it then. We even really visited them, because we just saw the chateau, and they weren't necessarily included in the sale. But at one point, the sale almost fell through, because somebody else decided to buy the chateau with all the outbuildings, and then we were put before the choice either to give up or to purchase again with the
reminder, please.
and he and we decided. Sorry? And we decided to go for it, and we had less money than expected for the renovation, and that's why we decided we renovate only 3 rooms, and then with the incoming money, we continue the renovation. But nowadays we are so happy that we made the decision, because for us now it feels that these buildings are absolutely part of the property, and they belong to the chateau, and we're looking forward to have them restored.
Next, Ben.
So that was right at the beginning. That was one of the first things that we had to do when we arrived, was digging the trench to bring in all of the mains, water and sewage. And I think you'll see on the next slide, it continued right across the whole of the front of the of the lawn. So that was a massive undertaking to have that. But yeah, it was something very essential to bringing the chateau up to sort of a little bit more comfortable standards. And it was digging by hand under the front steps, which were several tons of stone, and it was the only way to bring the pipes in that we found without damaging the chateau. So yeah, literally by hand, Philip, with a pickaxe.
Well, we had to dig underneath the granite steps, because removing the steps would have been a very big undertaking and very expensive. So the only choice we had is to dig a tunnel from both sides, and I barely could. It really had to stretch and crawl in to finally for the 2 tunnels to join in the middle, and I was extremely happy when that's this moment when I finally managed to get the 2 tunnels joining them.
Oh my gosh, a victorious moment.
Yeah.
And this is during the restoration of the facade, and it was a massive undertaking, because they had to remove, there was, as Philip said before, cement. They had used cement, so it was very important for us to remove that so that the chateau could breathe again. And we had amazing masons, and they were able to bring it back to traditional materials. So it was a lime mortar.
Lime mortar, yeah. Sand and lime, basically.
Yeah.
As it should be.
Yeah.
Speaking of the masons, how are you finding the people who are working on the chateau? What's your process for hiring those people, those experts?
Well, I had to interview a lot of companies, a lot of masons, to find a company that had experience in this type of buildings and didn't overcharge. So that was really, it took me a long time to find the right people, and even they made a mistake. So there's still some repairs to do, but the important thing is to find somebody who agrees to use the traditional techniques, because first of all, we wanted to bring it back to how it used to be. And second, we also were obliged because we are within we have a 12th century church next to our chateau, and this means that this church is listed. So all the buildings which are within 500 meters of this church have to go through planning to do whatever, especially if you do a facade. And so we were given the permission to restore, but we also had to restore it in the traditional way. So yeah, so it wasn't easy to find a company that is willing to do it, because it's difficult. You need to know how to do it, and you don't have the same insurances. It's not as it can go wrong. It's not as easy to do. It's not easy to do it right.
And this picture was the back facade, where you can see here the back doors were removed by the previous owners, and we think it was maybe in the 50s, and they had removed them because they needed to create a downstairs toilet and shower, and they removed them and put them in one of our old outbuildings and left them there, and had cemented up the back to create this downstairs toilet. And so I think that was one of the first things that we said when we visited the chateau, and they told us, oh yeah, the doors, they're in the barn. We just knew that we wanted to restore them and put those back. And I think on the next, so then on the right hand side is when the masons had finished breaking through and the doors had been reinstated. So as you can see, actually the left photo is the front door and the back door is the right. So they're identical, the front and back of the chateau, the doors are identical. But
these are massive 18th century doors with 18th century what are they
paneling?
Called? No, the metal parts.
The handles, the brass.
Yeah, all the hinges, and
yes,
so we were so lucky to find them, because we could as well have thrown them away or used them somewhere else. So when we learned that they actually still exist and they're in an outbuilding, we were extremely happy.
And this is how we found them, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are the two doors left in the barn, and so one of them did need a little bit of repairs, but
both of them needed a lot of repairs, but they were. But then finally we could install them.
And that's Philip putting the doors back.
And it's really nice because now we can, in the summer, you open both doors and you have always a nice draft, and it cools down the chateau in the summer months. That's how it was meant as well. The building, sort of air conditioning. And that's the front door from inside. And Anna spent, I don't know, weeks in sanding it because it had so many layers of paint, and we absolutely wanted to get all the metal parts back to metal because they're really beautiful. And
they'd just been sort of painted over, so yeah, that was painstaking work to repair that door. It also took a lot of work to repair it so that it wasn't drafty anymore. Yes. And this was when we had were bringing in all of the mains, water and sewage pipes, so that was in the front entrance. And here we are, yes, decorating. We had a lot of painting to do because it's just we brought in people for a lot of the skilled work that we couldn't do, such as masonry, carpentry. But where we could, Philip and I and some of our family, my parents, Philip's mum, we basically did everything ourselves. So, you know, painting, Philip was doing a lot of the waste pipe plumbing, the electrics, because we just had, I mean, we wanted to, we love it. We're really hands-on, we enjoyed renovating, but it was also a necessity to manage our budget and to try to sort of keep the cost down. So, and this was one of our exciting finds when we were renovating the facade, so the 19th century wing. We uncovered, because the original, this facade, yes, you can see the shutters were closed, and we uncovered a window, an original 19th century window behind the shutters that we didn't know existed, because on the interior of the room they had bricked it up and had cupboards. So when we actually showed this to the previous owner, who'd lived in the chateau her whole life and is in her 70s, she had no idea that it was there. So
there was an actual window behind the bricking up. They bricked it up, and we thought there's just bricks, but actually behind the shutters there was a window, and it was
pristine.
Pristine. It was as new. So it was a 19th century window, probably from the beginning of the 20th century or the 19th century. But with 19th century hinges, and it's in pristine condition.
So yeah, that was an exciting find.
Pleasant discovery.
And this is from the inside, so this is where we had to obviously remove all the bricks, and we uncovered the.
And broke a couple of glasses in the process.
Unfortunately, yeah, it was a bit tricky to remove the bricks without damaging them. And yes, so part of the renovation was obviously decorating, and as a designer, I decided to create some bespoke lino printed wallpaper. I was very inspired by the wallpapers that we found during our renovation process, and it was the first time I'd ever done anything like this, but it was, I think, a success. So I did this for 2 rooms, this technique, and it's a bit like woodblock printing. So I engraved a lino, and then I was able to print, like stamp the design onto wallpaper for the guest rooms.
This is the chateau, more or less how it is now. But there's still a lot of garden to do, as you can see. And yeah, this is the staircase. We briefly saw the staircase. Yeah, we had to replace the tiles on the floor, because the tiles that we found, they were, I think, from the 40s or 50s, and they weren't appropriate for chateau entrance. So what we did, we put in some stone from Burgundy. And it's a stone that you could find in a chateau of the 18th century. So it's stone, it's period coherent, and we really like the looks. And with the years, it will look a bit less new, and it will wear really nicely.
And just as a reminder, this is the space that was the movie set, the red and the blue, and yes. My goodness.
Yeah.
And this is our evening salon. It was one of the last rooms that we renovated this winter. So we didn't have time to do it initially when we first opened our guest house, but we managed to do it during a part of the second confinement. And I think our very first ever YouTube vlog was us painting, well, me painting that room. So yeah, it was, we were really happy when we finished this. It was a big undertaking, and we love it, and our guests really enjoy using it as well. So
beautiful.
And this is the breakfast salon. This is the room that you've seen before in a picture as well, with the new chimney. So this is the fireplace that we found online, and we managed to build it up again, and in marble, and we think it looks nice there. And we're really happy with this room. And the nice thing in our chateau, that's one thing we loved immediately, is that it has so many windows, and it's really like a glass box, because it doesn't matter where the sun is. There's always direct sunlight coming into these 2 salons.
And this is the green guest room, and with the lino printed wallpaper that I made myself. And the blue guest room, which I also, you can't see very well in this picture, but I also created the lino printed wallpaper for this room. And in that room, we also we decided to, when we renovated these rooms, we had a little bit of a dilemma what to do with installing a bathroom for our guest house. So we decided there was these 2 cupboards either side of the chimney, and so we ended up, instead of having to build in a bathroom, we decided to put the bathroom behind the cupboards, behind those panelings. So on one side there's the toilet and sink, and the other side there is the shower. So it's quite a nice feature, and we wanted to keep the integrity of the room, and sort of, we sacrificed the size of the bathroom, but
Oh, I think they're, Philip and Anna, are you still with us?
You know, it has, oh no.
We can hear you. Hello.
Okay, good. You cut out for just a second there, just as you were finishing about this room. No, it's okay. It was probably just a couple sentences.
Okay, so did you hear what I was talking about this room? Or?
About the bathroom and the shower, exactly. So it was just after that we lost you for a moment.
Okay, we didn't say anything else then.
Okay. Oh gosh.
Yeah, this is the, yeah, again, that's the longhouse with the thatched roof that we hope to restore as soon as possible.
And how many buildings are there altogether?
I think there's 6 outbuildings altogether, and
okay.
This is one of the most remarkable ones, and the other, probably even more remarkable one, is this one, because this is a barn. It's a very, very big barn, and it's at least 16th, if not 15th century, because the way the wooden structure is built it's a technique that hasn't been used anymore, starting from the 16th century. And when we had the Fondation du Patrimoine coming over to check on our renovation work, they were completely excited about this barn, and we discussed, and we definitely want to bring this barn back to life as well, and to save it. So we don't know what to do with it yet, because it's massive.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe a massive garage. And this is the second longhouse. Again, these longhouses, they're beautiful. They're really long and quite small. So it is sometimes a bit tricky how to use them and how to adapt them. But it's interesting, because at the beginning, when we were planning to finance all the renovation just through the guest house, we always saw these buildings as potential gîtes or other places that we can monetize with guests. But now that the YouTube channel and with the Patreon system arrived, and if we manage to develop that, we can look a bit different at these buildings. We can look at them more as a project that we can share, and then we might be able to restore them even in a more careful way, an appropriate way, because we don't necessarily have to turn them all into places to live and into rooms. So, which for me is one of the most exciting side effects of the videos, that we can look at our outbuildings and at the chateau itself in this different way, because the restoration, the process, and the documentation of the restoration can somehow be monetized, and it doesn't need to be everything a hotel, part of a hotel.
Right.
This is the 19th century coach house, and it's in rather good condition, because they got a new roof. It has a new roof, so it's safe. You don't need to restore it immediately, even though it's really beautiful. And when we bought the house, there was still what was it? Another sheep, a goat living in there, because it was
a goat.
On the left side there are stables, and in the middle, with the big doors, that's where the coaches would have been. And yeah, so it's a utility that was built at the same time when they built the extension of the chateau.
But we still don't know yet. We want to restore it, but we're not sure yet what we will do with the building. So that's still a question that we are asking ourselves. But I love that this one has so much character. It's my favorite outbuilding.
And this one, sorry, you cut out there for a second.
Oh, sorry.
This is a little chapel that we found in the grounds. When we arrived here, it was completely overgrown, so we didn't really see it, and we thought it was maybe just a wall, but actually it is a little chapel, and but it was in really, really bad condition. So we had to remove the remains of the roof and replace it with a membrane, just to keep the walls up till the day we will be able to put a new roof on it and to restore it. But I love it, and it's so nice to have such a building like this in your grounds, because yeah, it's amazing to walk there and then you discover it. And I'm really looking forward to restore it. And our carpenter loves it, and we already decided on how we're gonna build the roof, and it will be so much fun, and also to document it. And
you've already bought the praying chairs.
I already bought the crane chairs. Yeah. we have a really good roofer, and he lost that building, and it's going to be a challenge for him. And we're going to make a really nice roof, maybe with a little bell tower. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting project.
It's such a sweet building, particularly when you see it in context to all the other outbuildings, which are quite large, as you've mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a couple of questions here that are related to some of the photos we just saw, and while I'm asking you those, I'll let Ben invite the other participants to turn their videos on so they can participate in the conversation if they'd like to.